As anyone in the creative space will tell you, trends will come and go. But for better or worse, there seems to be one trend that's sticking around: gradients. And even though you can still find them everywhere, it doesn't mean you can't get creative with how you use them. I'm Levi with Totorojo Studios, and today I'm going to teach you 5 different types of gradients that you can use in order to help your work stand out from the sea of stale and standard gradients. Let's begin. Okay, here we are at the first gradient. This one's actually going to be the easiest to do because it's already available in the gradient window. First, we're going to hide this layer, hide the final layer, and then we'll get onto this working layer. So what I'm going to do is hit M to get my rectangle tool and draw a rectangle the size of the artboard. And once I do that, I'm going to come over here to Gradient, click here, and then I'm going to click this, Freeform. And as you can see, this automatically creates something based off of our swatches, and it's pretty close to what we had initially. Just to get back to what we had initially, I'm going to move this white up over here, and you can see the closer you get these colors up to these colors, the harsher the transitions are going to be. So let's move this over here, move this down here. When I have one of these selected, you can come up to swatches and just click, and that will automatically change it to that color. So to make this easier, you're going to want to get all of the colors you want to use ready to go up here in the swatches panel, so you can really quickly click this, click here, click this, click here, and then you don't have to worry about coming over here and changing the color manually that way. It's really easy to just click and click. And so to get it back to our original, I'm going to move this down here, give this some more space, and just play around to see what we like. To give you an example of something really exaggerated, you can come in here and get these really cool transitions from this red to blue to black, and it's all done right within the gradient tool. With this tool alone, you can create some super cool backgrounds or even some interesting fill for some shapes in your illustrations. This gradient is the one I actually discovered most recently, and it's achieved through a combination of the gradient tool and the blend tool. So to get this effect, we come in here, hide the art layer, and make sure we're on the working layer. And again, just like the last one, the first thing we're going to do is draw a rectangle using M for the rectangle tool, the size of the canvas. Right now it's set to kind of that medium gray. Let's just set it to blue. That'll give us a good idea of what we're looking at. And the first step is creating just one of those sections so that we can duplicate it a bunch of times, right? So to do that, I'm going to use the scale tool by hitting S on my keyboard and then Enter for options. And what I like to use is about 5% horizontal, because that's going to give me 1/20th of the entire size of the artboard. And that way I'll have 20 copies to create that gradient prism look. And I'm going to keep vertical at 100% just so it's the correct height, and hit OK. Once I've got this copy, I'm going to Option, click, drag, and then hit vertical align center, and then align left. That way it's going to give me something over here so that I can do the blend from here to here. And then I'm going to Option Shift drag and then align right. Okay, now that we've got all 3 of our shapes, I'm going to blend them all together. So hit W on your keyboard for the blend tool, click the top right point on each of those, and now you can see it's already blending them across. But right now we can't even really tell what it's doing. So to start looking at our effect, I'm going to click on this one, come over to Gradient, and just give it a standard linear gradient. And already you can see that's a pretty cool effect. Like, I could ship it like this and give it kind of a vintage, retro, almost a horror look to it, right? Something that messes with you a little bit. But to achieve the effect we had in the beginning, I want to be able to edit these individually. So to do that, I'm going to hit V for the selection tool and then double click on any of these 3 shapes to go into isolation mode. And once I'm here, I can click on it and start editing this gradient. So first I'm going to drag black onto both ends, like how I had it earlier. That in there. And I'm using a rich black instead of the standard Illustrator black just because it's a lot deeper. And to be able to edit these individually, I'm going to get V for selection and double click on this to go into isolation mode. Once I'm here, I'm going to click and drag to select all of these and start editing the gradient here. And first I'm going to put black on both ends like I did in the original image. And then I'm going to grab yellow, drop it dead center, red on one side, and blue on the other. right now this is looking pretty rough. I'll click out of isolation mode so you can see everything happening. Again, it's kind of a trippy look. It might be what you're going for, but it's giving me kind of a headache right now. So I'm gonna double click again for isolation mode and just click drag to select all of these, hit G for my gradient tool, and click drag to draw it. So this also is not what we're looking for, right? Because it's just a solid gradient throughout all of them. And to fix that, we're gonna double click for isolation mode once again, click on here with my selection, G for gradient, click drag. I like to do it at an angle because it creates some of the shadow right here to really separate the shapes. And then hold command to click, drag, command click, drag. And so as you can see, since I did each of those at an angle similar to this one, you are getting some of that shadow. And now this is where the fun part happens. We start to create shapes or abstractions with the way that we're doing these gradients. So right now it's consistent because I essentially drew almost the same gradient on each of these, just at this angle. And so I'm gonna get up here and zoom out. I'm gonna click drag a lot higher and then stop it right around here. I'll click here, and then I'm gonna start this one a little lower, maybe right here. And then this one, I'll start even lower. Let's go down here, and then just kind of click drag. And what I'm looking for is this middle lining up in a way that makes sense, because if I did something too crazy, you would start to get misalignment across these colors and it'll just look bad. So I'm gonna hit V for selection, double click out of isolation mode, and there you have it, your Prism Gradient. You've probably noticed on these first two, if you zoom in, I've got some digital noise. And as a designer, that's something you either love or hate as you come across these gradients. For me, I like to add it just because it gives a little bit of an organic look to this, something that's not so digital and perfect and clean, and that's why I like to add it. If you want to know how I add it, stay tuned to the end of the video because I'm going to show you. Okay, this next gradient is something I've been seeing crop up more and more lately, and I think it's successful for one main reason. It takes something new, the Freeform Gradient, and mixes it with something old, 8-bit graphics. And a lot of times that can be kind of the secret recipe to creating something interesting. So to get this one done, we're gonna come in here, hide the final, go on to the working, and once again, hit M for rectangle, draw a rectangle the size of the artboard, and then go up here, click Gradient, and get your Freeform Gradient. Once you have it, hit V for selection, click on here. I'm gonna get rid of my outline. Click back here. G again to edit. And then I'm gonna jump in and start building what I want my gradient to look like. So I know I don't want white in this one, so I'm gonna click that, get black, bring in some red down here, blue over here, black again. Another tip is if you click a color and want another of it, you just click again in here. You don't have to select a new color. You just select one that's already on the board and duplicate it by clicking again. I'm gonna move this red up here, and just to give it a little more flair, I'm gonna click down here and add this orange that I prepared earlier, just so it's one more color to play with in this kind of crazy gradient. I'm gonna hit V for selection. Okay, once we're happy with what our gradient looks like, we'll come to Object and Rasterize. And I know this might feel a little counterintuitive just because we're in Illustrator in the first place because we want to create vector graphics, right? But this will all make sense in a second. So first I'm going to change the resolution from high to screen just because we don't need it that high and all it does is take up power, right? So I'm going to hit OK. And now that this is rasterized, I'm going to come up to Object once again and go to Create Object Mosaic. And this is the part where we tell it how many squares we want to make up our texture. And knowing that 1920 by 1080 is a 16:9 ratio, I'm just gonna double that, so 32 by 18. I'll hit OK, and then we can't see, but I'm gonna click out of here, and immediately you can see it's taken our Freeform Gradient and created all of these little squares. And right now they're grouped, but you can ungroup them, select them individually, and you'll see that they're just a bunch of different shades all in one. And you can do this with really anything. I just do it for gradients because it's a way to add some interest to something you might see pretty often. This is probably the gradient I use most in my work. I really like it because it's similar to the Freeform Gradient, but it gives you some unexpected results and you have a little more control over the final product. Before we start doing this, I'm going to talk through it real quick. So right here, you can see 4 separate shapes. We've got our really dark red, and it kind of comes across here. We've got our regular red, and it's up here. And then same down here, dark red following this, and light red right here. So I'm just gonna draw those shapes and then we'll talk through the rest of it. You can see that I've already gotten a dark red swatch in my swatches, and I would suggest using a darker version of whatever primary color you're gonna use. You can also see that as I'm drawing these, you're not seeing it over here. The way I like to do it is by creating an overlay, and it's just a layer. If I unlock it and select it, you can see that it's just a layer the same color as the background. So it's cut out here and drawn out here. I'm gonna start drawing the light red sections. Make sure I'm back on my working layer. And in here, I like to draw some that are close to each other and some that are further from each other. So usually when the peaks are higher, so when the peak is high here, I'll give it some more separation, but when the peak is low, I won't separate it as much. Okay, now that we've got our shapes drawn, we're gonna start blurring this. So first, we'll get that shape, come up to Effect, Blur, and Radial Blur. So instead of doing the spin blur by default, we're gonna go into the zoom blur and change the direction that the zoom is coming from. And what I want is for things going this direction to be very blurry, but shapes coming this direction, like this line, to not be quite as blurry. So I'm gonna come up here and just make it so the blur is in this direction, not so much this direction. Hit OK. And right off the bat, that's already giving us some interesting shapes. So I'm just gonna click this one, Effect, and apply Radial Blur, since we already got it kind of how we like it. And if you wanna edit it, you can come over here, hit that, and change the direction a little bit, just so it blends a little better, right? And then come over here, Effect, Radial Blur, it's already up there for me. And I'm gonna change the direction once again. This time I'm gonna come down from the bottom right. So it's blurring here, but not as much here. Gonna apply the blur to this one as well. So now this is getting close, but it's still not quite there. The blur is a little choppy, right? Especially right here. It kind of goes from solid to heavy blur. And so to alleviate that, I'm gonna click here, Effect, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I'm gonna add a little bit more. This is too much. It kind of gets rid of all sense of reality here. Gonna pull it down until I get just enough blend that it feels natural. Hit OK. Do the same up here. Effect, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Awesome, that's pretty good. Click this one. Effect, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Okay, now you can see that this is an effect that you don't see quite as often as something like a freeform, because you're getting heavy blur in this direction, but not so much from this direction. And the nice thing is you can hit A for your direct selection, click these curves, and change it after the fact. The only downside to using this one is that it's a little more CPU heavy. So I would recommend, if you don't have quite as powerful of a machine, to focus on mastering the freeform gradient first. Another thing you might run into is if the blur is too heavy, you might be selecting this one when you're trying to select this one. And a way to easily select the one you're trying to is to hit Command Y to get outline mode. And then you can just deal with the actual outlines and not the graphics themselves. So you can move these around, these points, and then hit Command Y again just to see what your edits have been. And that brings us to our final gradient, which is just an iteration of the motion gradient, but achieved a little bit differently. You can see I've still got layers, so I've got my dark blue here, my light blue here, and then my white. And I kept all of those in my swatches just so they're easy to access and I don't have to worry about it once I've gotten started. To kick this one off, let's hide the layer with all the final artwork on it and jump onto a working layer. I'm gonna hide this here and zoom out. And the first thing I'm gonna do is start drawing these shapes. So first, I'm gonna draw the smallest shape, kind of the center. And these tend to look best when there's a little bit of asymmetry to them. If it just looks kind of like a mask or like a mouth, if you don't give some asymmetry to it. So my next step is just drawing shapes that get progressively bigger. I'm gonna hit Command Y, so I just see the outlines, hit P for pen again, and just start drawing some curves. And what I've found is that curves that follow a similar trajectory, but fluctuate in distance from each other, tends to give the best results, exactly like the motion gradient. And then draw one more set of curves. And this time I'm gonna keep it close on these ones and wide on these ones. Okay, now that I've got each of my shapes drawn, you can see them here, I'm gonna draw one big rectangle to cut them out of. So I'm gonna hit M for rectangle and drag it out quite large. I'm gonna start cutting these shapes out of it. So I'm gonna hit Command Shift left bracket to send that rectangle to the back. And I'm gonna change it to our first color, which is the dark blue. Real quick, I'm gonna select everything that's not on a locked layer with Command A. And I'm gonna get rid of these outlines. We do not want that. Click out here. Okay, so once I've got this shape, I'm gonna hit Command C so I can save it for later and start cutting things out. Command Y so I see which one I'm gonna get. And since I'm using the dark blue, I'm gonna get the smallest shape and just come over here to Pathfinder, minus front. I'm gonna hit Command B to paste a clean rectangle into the back of this. And then I'm gonna select the next shape with Shift click and then Pathfinder, minus front. Command B to send a clean rectangle to the back again and get our last shape, this guy, and minus front. So I'm gonna change the colors now so you can clearly see what's happening. The biggest shape, I'm gonna put to white, and then our medium blue, and then our dark blue. So now you can see the general shape it's gonna have in the end. The next step, just like the motion gradient, is to click this object, hit Effect, Blur, and Radial Blur. This time, instead of coming from a corner, we're gonna select somewhere within this space to have it zoom out of. So I'm gonna come over here so we get more blur all the way over here and less blur here. Okay, do the same for this one. Effect, apply radial blur. Effect, apply radial blur. So as you can see, that's giving us some nice sharp lines here and some pretty blurred lines over here, which is a nice touch. It gives you some variety in those edges. But just like we did with the motion blur, I'm gonna start selecting these and adding a Gaussian blur as well. And as you can see, you can't edit it over here anymore because you've got two types of blur on it. But you can easily fix that by going to Appearance and scrolling down, and then you can edit them independently. So go to Gaussian blur, click that. I'm just gonna pull it down a little bit. It was getting a little too soft for my taste, so nice. That's pretty good. And then let's do it on the last one, Effect, Blur, Gaussian Blur. So this version is a lot like the motion blur we were doing just a second ago, but it gives it kind of an interesting look because it's going from dark out to light. And you could accomplish this similarly to the motion blur if you just drew the dark shape, the medium shape, the light shape, and had the background be white. So it's really pick your poison, whichever one you like more. I'm going to show you how to do some of this digital noise that you can see just to add some texture, because it takes away some of the cold, sharp perfection of just the regular gradients. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is come over here and just hide that noise so we can see what we're working with. So first we're going to once again hit M for the rectangle, click 1920 by 1080, press enter, and align it to the center. And so what I've found works best for me is changing this color to a 50% gray. And I do that because the noise is going to create some blacks and some whites. And it decides how much black and how much white to add based off of the overall tone of the color you use first. And a medium gray gives us a lot of white and a lot of black to work with, so we get a more even noise. So to create that, I'm going to come up to Effect, Texture, and Grain. It's honestly pretty straightforward. I just keep it at grain, I play with the intensity and contrast, and I make sure the type is stippled. I'm gonna hit OK, and then we change the blend mode. Opacity, normal, and I like soft light the most. We can go through some of these. Multiply, it's really heavy on the blacks, a little bit muddy, right? Screen, really heavy on the white, blows out everything. Soft light is kind of the sweet spot for me. So I pick soft light and I come over, and usually in the 60 range is where I'll do it for certain colors. And then closer to the 25 to 15 range is what I'll do for other colors. And this way it's not super over the top, but if you zoom in, gives you some of that grain, makes you believe that somehow it was created, it wasn't just made up out of some ones and zeros. One problem you might run into if you're using this noise is performance. Sometimes just calculating this noise over and over again will cause a little bit of dip in your performance, and the way I get around that is selecting it and then rasterizing it. And this way, it's not always calculating. It's an image that the computer has to think about, but not a calculation. So, gonna zoom out, and you can see when you rasterize it, it gives it kind of this border, and I just crop image. Pull it in, usually snaps pretty well to the corners. And there you have it. Super easy grain in Illustrator. One of the secrets to being successful in any field, but especially design, is developing your ability to take something familiar or popular and put your own spin on it. Now that we've seen a glimpse of what can be done with gradients to do just that, let me know in the comments what trend you'd like to see turned on its head next. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. In the meantime, check out this video that goes in depth on the blend tool in Illustrator. And as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.